A very warm welcome to the new episode of Ink and Insights. This is your host Sumit Sharma Samir. This is a Nepal-based podcast, and if you are interested listening to the thought leaders and Nepali influencers from around the world, please subscribe to my channel. I'm extremely pleased to welcome Aletta André and Abhimanyu Kumar in my program today. Aletta André is a Dutch historian and journalist who has covered South Asia for Dutch and international media since 2009. Her debut youth novel, Het Misji Dat Door India Fetist, the girl, I hope I have pronounced well, the girl who cycled through India.
Quite well. Sorry.
About the mass exodus of migrant laborers from Indian cities during the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown, which was published by the Netherlands by Liting Stevens in 2021. After 15 years of living in New Delhi, she returned to her native Netherlands in 2024. Similarly, Abhimanyu Kumar is an Indian poet and journalist with a wide experience covering politics, art, culture, and minority issues. His poetry collection, Milan and the Sea, was published by Red River in 2017, and he translated Australian poet Robert Wood's poetry collection, Redgate, also published from Red River in 2020. I'm extremely pleased to welcome both of you in my program. Welcome to Ink and Insights with Sumit Sharma Samir.
Thank you.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Aletta and Abhimanyu, I'd be honored to, know what drew both of you to write The House of Awadh, and why was it important to tell the story now?
Well, especially in North India, the story of Wilayat Mahal is quite well known amongst many people, especially in Delhi, I guess, because it was kind of living history for a long time. She and her children lived in the center of Delhi, but kind of on the edge of society, or kind of just outside of society, in an old monument in the city forest, really inaccessible to regular people. You could walk there. We made a hike there in 2015 when Wilayat, the mother, died in the 1990s, but her children, Sakina and Raza, continued to live there. So in 2015, we walked up there, for me, for the first time. And you couldn't even see the monument from where you could go. You know, there were signboards saying House of Awadh, but you couldn't even see the building where they were living in. So it was a bit of a mystery. Who are these people who live there? They said they are descendants of the House of Awadh, which, used to be a kingdom until it was annexed by the British in 1856. And we felt like, there is a story behind that mystery, and that became even more clear after Ali Raza finally died in 2017, and Abhimanyu first and me later visited Malcha Mahal, the monument, this time properly. We could go inside, we could see what they left behind, and there were all kinds of glimpses and clues of who they were, we also could find the contacts of people who knew them. One of them was a man who worked for them for many years. And after speaking to him, we found out more, that there was a connection to Kashmir and a connection to Pakistan, and that it went way beyond just the history of Awadh or modern days, but it's kind of this family's history is connected to such a large part of South Asian history, going from Lucknow to Pakistan, Karachi, Lahore, Kashmir, and even Nepal, Kathmandu. So that was very intriguing to dive into.
Yeah.
Abhimanyu, just if you could add, the Kathmandu connection to the book, it would be interesting to, explore.
The Kathmandu connection, yes, most certainly. Because she claimed her ancestry from Hazrat Mahal, the rebel queen, the wife of Wajid Ali Shah, who fought bravely against the British in the 1857 War of Independence, or Sepoy Mutiny, as it's variously called. So what is lesser known is that after the mutiny kind of petered out around 1858, then Hazrat Mahal continued to hold fort in some UP towns like Bahraich and Gonda, and slowly she reached the Tarai region, which is closer to Nepal, Along with, in fact, she was in touch with others like Tatya Tope, who is said to have died in the Tarai. It remains a mystery actually how he died and what happened to him. But she went on to, as far as Kathmandu, and the king who was supporting the British in the war, but ultimately he allowed her to take refuge in Nepal and allowed her to set up her base there, where she reached with many followers, thousands of followers, and set up an establishment and continued to live there for at least 2 more decades with her son, in fact.
Yeah, and still not that much known is of that period, but the descendants of that following still live there. And we also, we wanted to explore that connection a little bit more because even when this family was living in Lucknow in the 1970s, they were telling some people there like that they're originally from Kathmandu. So they were also say, sometimes they were saying that they are from Persia, from Lucknow, but they were telling people in Lucknow they're originally from Kathmandu. And also in the papers that they left behind, there was one letter from a person in Nepal called
Rodos Mahan.
Rodos Mahan.
We could not identify him.
Who was apparently in touch with them, and they had asked him to find the grave of Hazrat Mahal and send them a picture. And he did that. And
also they were interested in its upkeep. So he informed them that, the grave is in such a condition, but not too bad, he actually at that point, I think, said. So they used to take an interest.
Right. Your research must have uncovered many layers of history. Were there any particular discoveries that surprised or deeply moved you?
I could go for that because what really seemed very interesting to me was how India and Pakistan had come very close to having a plebiscite on Kashmir. But it's really like, just few years after independence, Prime Minister Nehru was in power, and there Muhammad Ali Bogra was there. And I came to know that because she had heckled Muhammad Ali Bogra at a public rally in Karachi, where she had said that you have not done anything for Kashmir, which intrigued me a great deal. So we dug in and we found out that, okay, of course, she was, through our research, that she was an office bearer of Muslim Conference, which was a split faction that split from National Conference in Kashmir. And she was an office bearer. But what we also realized that India and Pakistan were quite close to having a plebiscite, but it did not come through because Pakistan joined some defense pacts, and India as well jailed Sheikh Abdullah, so that must have annoyed the Pakistani authorities. So both sides must have done their share in not having that come through. That I found very interesting.
Yeah, and in connection to that, we also, really, I feel like we really uncovered a bit about Wilayat and her past because we knew that she was in Karachi, and others have also covered or reported on that she was in Karachi after partition. And that incident, that something happened with the prime minister after which she was arrested and also sent to a mental institution. But I think what we really found out about reading more newspaper articles of the time and speaking with historians and reading more about also the women in the early political movement of nation building in Pakistan in the 1950s was, that she was a very special woman actually, and she was very ambitious and well connected and just as that India and Pakistan came so close to a plebiscite. The small things that can change the course of history. It can also be, the little things that are related to that history and small things that can really change the course of someone's life. So I think the interconnectedness between the history and their lives is a red thread in the book as well.
Yeah.
Right. The protagonist of this book seems to, be walking through a very tragic life. Could you briefly outline what this tragedy is and how it shaped the history of Awadh?
Oh, well, again, there are things that are kind of parallel in that way, the tragedy of Awadh and the tragedy of this woman, because she, of course, was born after Awadh was already annexed by the British. And she said she's a descendant of Hazrat Mahal, which we have not been able to verify. There are no, like, she says she is the descendant of a daughter of Hazrat Mahal, of which there are no sources.
But
There's
we
no
do
proof.
know, it is in the book, that she was connected to one of the wives of Wajid Ali Shah as per his family members. Just to add.
Yeah, I was getting there. So she does descend from her mother's side, from Awadh. And there's a lot of tragedy in the history of Awadh, and the annexation, even at the time, was considered unjust, even by British opposition in Britain itself, not just by Indians. And when it comes from Wilayat, she the first major tragedy was partition. I guess it is huge, not just for her, but for millions and millions of people in the subcontinent. It was a huge tragedy, and it seemed also at some point of time to be an opportunity. So it seems that that for Wilayat's husband saw an opportunity in moving to Pakistan, because he was a civil servant, and by making that move in just one go, he could get a much higher position in government. And it was for well-educated Muslims, it was an opportunity to play a bigger part in governance and in decision making. But for a woman like Wilayat, who had her own thoughts and ambitions, she didn't have much of a choice than to follow her husband. She went there, then he died, one of her children died. Her political views were opposed by those in power. She was actively, obstructed in that she did not get her say, she did not get her day in court. Instead, she was sent to a mental institution. She was silent, essentially. She was silenced. Then in Kashmir, there were other things, like she had some friends, but they suffered a fire for once. They were not accepted by everyone. There were a lot of rumors, them being immigrants from Pakistan, although originally they were from Lucknow. Before that, even, she was born in Lahore. So, but once upon a time, it was all one country. But once partition happened, they were looked at with suspicion because they came from Pakistan. So there were rumors, there was gossip, there was a fire. Then she came to Delhi, Lucknow. Some people tried to help her, but also more and more people started to look at her and as just unreasonable and crazy, and that is
multiple tragedies, including the one of Kashmir, its non-resolution.
And then the history itself, like, is parallel with that. Like, I mean, the tragedy of Awadh that happened before she was even born, but then there, the tragedy of partition and the tragedy of Kashmir be remaining until today, an unresolved thing.
तिमीसँग अब धेरै टाइम छैन है, बिहे गर्नु छ भने गरिहाल, नत्र घरबाट मलाई अन्त्य बिहे गर्दिनु।
भर्खर 3 वर्ष भयो एमबीबीएस जोइन गरेको, 5 वर्षको कोर्स हो। के भो? अचम्म छ। एक्सक्यूज मी सर, सर मेरो 5 वर्षको कोर्स 3 वर्षमा सकाउन मिल्दैन?
गेट आउट।
हेलो,
के सोच्यौ त?
के सोच्ने? मैले प्रिन्सिपलसँग पनि कुरा गरिसके। 3 वर्षमा पनि के हुन्छ? के हुन्छ 3 वर्षमा?
के भयो भाइ? ल बस। साउजी, एक कप चिया। कसले भन्यो 3 वर्षमा के हुँदैन भनेर? यो हेर, एलआईसी नेपालको धनवृष्टि योजनामा 3 वर्षमा पैसा फिर्ता हुन्छ।
ए हो र?
जीवन बीमाको साथमा धनवृष्टि 3 वर्षमा एलआईसी नेपालको धनवृष्टि योजना। एलआईसी नेपाल।
Warm services to delight your senses, taking hospitality to newer heights. Nepal Airlines.
And the book is co-authored by both of you. How did you divide the research and writing responsibilities between you?
Well, I went to several places in India. Lucknow, we both went together, but I was in Kashmir and Calcutta, and Aletta was in Karachi and Lahore. So we picked up the places that we were most comfortable with, or we thought we could access the sources. There were also like visa-related issues. I mean, being an Indian, it's not that easy to go to Pakistan, so she was ideal choice. Other than that, in writing, we both helped each other with descriptions, and Aletta is very good with structuring. So I was helped by her on that particularly.
And Abhi did lots of really the time-consuming research, like the archival work. He spent days and days in the National Archive in Delhi, as well as the Prime Minister Memorial Library, where you have all the newspaper archives. So he did a lot of that, we say one's work. Yeah.
Right. And what are the biggest challenges you faced while researching and writing the book? Were there any sources that were particularly difficult to access?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the sources were a bit difficult to access. First of all, we didn't even know where they were. It took a lot of legwork and some luck as well, which came along with the legwork, I feel. Some doors opened ultimately. Initially, it was a bit difficult, especially in Kashmir, to trace the people who knew them. Because the leads were far and few in between. In particular, also what I realized is that not all stories can be completely documented in archives, which are a kind of institutional memory. And some stories are a bit, outre, and they fall in those cracks of history. So the oral sourcing was also equally important as much as the work in archives, which was also useful.
Yeah, and some sources, like, for example, the person who worked for them for so many years, he initially did not want to speak at all. Then he wanted to meet, but he didn't want to speak on the record because he was still very loyal to them. And he said he had promised them to never speak about them. So he didn't want to do it. But then later on, when more and more stories from other sources started to come out, and he felt like they were not being... they were not doing justice to their legacy, is when he made a decision to really tell his full side of the story to us with his name and everything. But it took a long time, like a year maybe, until we reached that point. So yeah, and there were some dead ends as well, of course. For example, and some things are really, government sources can be hard to access, but when it comes to archives, but private even more. Like, for example, they lived in a privately owned housing association in Karachi, which we have the address of. But to kind of find out whose name this house was registered in, they just refused cooperation. There are also historical difficulties, because in Pakistan, which we should mention, that their name came up in the the assassination of the first Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan. So because of that, I think it's also difficult in Pakistan too, because there is some kind of a bit of a silence around the whole situation. Yeah.
And even the Indian government here, especially with regards to Kashmir, I think has destroyed some files. Whether that was routine destruction or some intentional destruction, we don't know. And we also know that there are some files still that they have, but which they did not release to us through a right of information process.
Yeah, and a lot of sources just don't exist, in a place like, Karachi used to be Pakistan's capital, then it moved to Islamabad, and just along the way, a lot of files got lost. So, things like, for example, death records, nobody even knows where they are. I tried to find out, but it's really difficult.
Birth and death records. In Kashmir also, there was a flood in 2013. So there also I heard that some papers are not there. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and for example, in Lucknow, like we knew the date of birth of one of the children because he became a well-known Air Force pilot in the Pakistani army, and he is in a remembrance book. He's mentioned with his date of birth, and so we went to Lucknow register, and we found the birth record of him from 1928. So it was correct. So that birth record is there in Lucknow. But we could only locate that because we knew his date of birth, and then they were willing to look it up. But then I asked if I could just, flip through the records to find out if we can, by that way, find out the birth records of the other children without knowing the dates. But it's not allowed. They say only if you know the date, we can find it out. So if you don't know when they're born, it's really hard to find out by going through records also.
And I mean, as far as I understand, both of you have worked as journalists.
Yeah.
And how did your journalistic experience shape the way you approach this historical narrative?
In my case, it helped a lot. It is really a journalistic history. It is a journalistic work. And I'm happy to call it that, because all that what I learned in journalism, to cross-check your sources. If somebody is saying something, even then, in this case also, we tried to have as many sources corroborate, because there was a lot of oral sourcing. So you had to speak to other people. Then memory comes in, so you had to cross-check. Even with books, for example, that I consulted, I tried to read as many books as possible about the same event, especially, for example, the start of the 60s in Kashmir, when they arrived. So everything was driven by journalistic methods.
Partially, I would say.
Okay.
Like, I mean, I think, yeah, definitely. Of course, like some things are the same, but then it is not a standard like which, why, what kind of news story, right? So I think the approach we took to the story was a bit more open-minded than you would have with journalism. With journalism, you do try, at the end of the day, you try to be balanced, neutral, factual, whereas this story we felt didn't lend it for such a kind of more bland or standard clear-cut journalistic article. There were many more layers and nuances to it, which we also discuss very much in the book about the kind of the nuances that are there between truth and lie and black and white.
Madness.
Madness. What is madness? It's not an objective kind of thing.
Has its own rationality, and so we had to consult some of the literature on that, from Michel Foucault, the French philosopher, and Freud, and we had to go a little bit into that.
Yeah.
Because that kind of presented us with a gray area, between reason and unreason, between rational and irrational. Some of the things that she was saying, we had to parse. And
so there are some part of it has a bit of a philosophical approach, maybe.
Yeah, we had to adopt it.
And we had to be more open about memory also. I think that memory is also a section in the book, and when you have such a vast subject and subjects, these people that are that have led so many lives, and different people remember there in different ways, and we try to kind of validate the different memories and equally, even though they differ, to kind of
sometimes
build on top of each other a more complete story, which is not necessarily the full and only truth. It's just it offers a wide and varied version of it. Yeah.
Right. And the book is both a historical account and a human story. Were there particular figures in this history whose stories resonated with you the most?
For example, I was going to say it even before when you had asked which stories kind of we discovered and which affected us or intrigued us. In particular, the story of Warren Hastings, who was the first Governor General of India, because he of course has some claims to having genuinely advanced the cause of India, in that sense, Indian wisdom, by setting up the Asiatic Society of India with William Jones. and he was into Indian culture and everything, interested. At the same time, he could also be corrupt. He could also be ruthless. And we didn't know in the detail, and what a fascinating event it was that he was tried in London. He was impeached for his misdemeanors, and there were 22 charges against him, out of which 6 were selected, and several philosophers like Sheridan and Burke, they spoke and they excoriated him, and his reputation, we believe, was quite severely damaged. So that's something we learned.
Yeah, and also how someone's memory changes over time. So the way Warren Hastings was remembered, like in his time he was impeached, but later he was presented as a hero, then he came down again. So it's interesting how someone's... so history is also, history keeps rewriting itself in a way. And the way it says a lot about the present, how we see the history. That's also very interesting, but that's a side note. I think, in terms of characters, I mean, even Wajid Ali Shah himself, like when we started out, or when you started out, you were actually very interested in him for being like a Muslim ruler, but, with secular ideals and
deeply secular,
artistic, is a very interesting person. And from the present day people, the family is central to the book. Wilayat, Sakina, Ali Raza. I was... I think we really, maybe feel like we got to know them a bit more. Still not completely, but but really they're different personalities. And also Asad, that's another brother who was very much present in Kashmir, and we met so many neighbors who knew him and who again told, his story, and his personality is again very distinctive from the others. So all of them were different people, and that was very interesting. And I still think Ali Raza is a very interesting character also.
He is
surrounded by these kind of strong women, and he. I think he lived a bit in between. Like also when they lived in Multi Mahal, he was the one who ventured out to kind of to buy. They kept dogs. He was the one who went out to buy meat for the dogs. He still had some curiosity for the outside world. He went out and sometimes also chatted with people, and he traveled until the 80s. He traveled, so even when they lived in the railway station in the 1970s, he traveled to other countries. But he kept coming back also. So I think he is also particularly interesting from all of them.
Right. My, perhaps last question for today's program to both of you. What do you hope readers take away from the House of Awadh?
I think what they could take away is to approach a person or an individual in the context in which they exist, and not just something that we think is the most important part about them. For example, how the media presented mostly that whether she was a royal or an imposter, and everything became trapped in this binary. But then I think everybody, all of us, or the most of us, exist in a kind of we are not black and white. And I think that's the most important thing that should be understood, that people are not black and white. They have motivations for things they do. They have justifications. Sometimes they make choices which go wrong. And so the context is important to understand a person.
Yeah, and to not judge someone completely by its cover, to realize that that someone sometimes is telling a story that goes deeper than the exact words they say. There's different layers to a story that somebody is telling, and if you don't take an interest, you might never find out like the rich lives they lived.
Abhimanyu, Aletta, I think that's the most difficult thing for people in today's time to in kind of give a lot of time and space to understand people and understand the context rather than understand individual directly, right? So, but we have to continue pursuing or continue to understand the context to understand the individual. I really like that last suggestion that both of you gave. With that
Thank
note,
you.
I really like to thank you for your time, and it was
Thank you.
lovely talking with you.
Thank you
It
so
was
much.
lovely talking to you. And in the beginning, I think, a couple of minutes late. I'm sorry. I was just making some tea. And thank you for having us. It was a real pleasure and an honor.
Sure.